Welcome, folks, to The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Every week, diving deep into the truth of Catholic social teaching and restoring all things in Christ.
The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner.
I'm Dr. Bud Marr.
We're coming to you from these United States of America here in Iowa, in the middle of the country. We're on Iowa Catholic Radio, and we are The Uncommon Good, where I say we do good things, Bud. What about you?
Oh, yeah, doing good daily, or at least 75% of the week.
Doing our best, at least daily. Not too bad. No, okay, yes, we're The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr, joining you this Wednesday. So happy to have you with us on the show. I am the Senior Advisor for Mission Initiatives and the Director of the Center for Human Flourishing down at Mercy College. Bud, what do you do at the old college ball game?
I'm the Associate Provost, and to be honest, these days, most all the academic questions are coming to me. So, I don't know.
You're the answer guy.
If you have anything dealing with academic affairs at Mercy College of Health Sciences, you're free to contact me.
You're instead of the Catholic answer guy, you're the Mercy academic answer guy.
Hey, where'd the Catholic movie guy go?
We
had the Catholic movie guy back in 2017, 18. I feel like maybe COVID drove him off the air, which doesn't make sense.
No, it's true. You should be able to watch plenty of movies. I think the other thing too, right, is let's be honest, it might be Cardinals baseball, which has been a lot of fun at the end of some seasons, but not really hitting it out of the park, pun intended, when it comes to the first round of playoffs.
Yeah, it killed me. I mean, obviously we had a better season than the Cubs, but to get into the playoffs and be up 2-0 in the ninth inning in Game 1, I feel like blowing that lead really changed the complexion of the series.
Yeah, we have to hand it to our Cub fan friends who pointed out that we only got to play 2 more games than they did.
Yeah, that was a nice burn. But no, movies, I'll have to reach out to the Catholic movie guy. I know the movie-going experience has changed.
That's
More
right.
people are streaming at home.
I like that we're making excuses for a guy who is not in this show and hasn't been on air for a while. But, Catholic movie guy, if you happen to be listening, we're thinking of you. What we also think of is how often we should thank Mercy College of Health Sciences for underwriting our show, mchs.edu. Mercy College, where we have a devotion to student success, which means we're thinking about our students all the time. mchs.edu to go check out what's happening at Mercy College.
Yeah, it's exciting. And, we're situated here in Des Moines, but we've got students from other parts of the country and had some exciting conversations recently with, whenever I tell people I work at a health sciences college, they're like, please send us medical professionals. So it's a challenging time, but also an exciting time to be in that field.
I like that they're like, can you just speed it up, bud? You just got done saying everybody should ask you questions if it has to do with academics at Mercy College. So They're just like, can you cut a few corners and immediately send us people?
No, I was thinking about conversations with folks from other parts of the state, and then I thought, well, I better not mention specific institutions, but good conversations happening. We already do have, the 3+1 with Drake, so students can study there, end up at Mercy College doing a nursing degree, so a lot of exciting things.
And it's really important to point out, this is a test. I was trying to show our accreditors that Bud does not say that we can cut corners, because when you get a Mercy College education, there are no corners cut. You will be the health science provider that this community needs, mchs.edu. Well, Bud, we're going to get back on track a little bit to this week's show. Excuse me, I need to learn how to talk. We're going to talk about sacrificial leadership and bring up one of the saints in order to show what that looks like. So we're going to bring up actually the patroness of our show, St. Joan of Arc. You might think, what sort of leader can you be if you end up burnt at the stake? But I actually think that it's exactly this sort of sign of contradiction, as it were, Bud, that's important when it comes to leadership in the Catholic key, imitating Christ's sacrificial leadership, that we take that seriously and consider it for the show and the whole arc of the series that we've been doing.
Yeah, I'm excited. St. Joan of Arc is, as we mentioned before, one of the patrons of the show, so we've got a strong devotion to her. If you've ever seen our logo, it's a shout out, right?
That's right.
So love talking about St. Joan of Arc. I was really excited when you kind of floated this idea with me.
Act and God will act is what the French on our show says. Then the Latin on our show icon says, St. Joan of Arc, pray for us. So it's about due time. We hit some other people, of course, like biblical characters. Some of the people were important to us, but eventually we were going to get around to St. Joan. So we'll consider St. Joan of Arc, the Maiden of Orleans, to think about what it means to be a sacrificial leadership in the key of Jesus Christ, to imitate him in his sacrificial leadership, continuing what we've been doing here in 2022. We're so glad to have you with us. This is The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr, stick around, and we'll be back right after this.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Skeffington's Formalware, in business since 1951, with locations in Des Moines, West Des Moines, Coralville, and Ankeny. Skeffington's Formalware, fitting you for life celebrations. Online at skeffingtons.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from Mercy One, your expert circle of personalized care for all your health needs. With more care locations than anyone, your best life is their one purpose. Find your doctor at mercy1.org. Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Dental Associates, addressing your smile needs and dreams. 515-225-6742. Des Moines-DentalAssociates.com. Thank you, Dental Associates, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by CTO. Your support has helped thousands of students attend our Catholic schools. CTOIowa.org. At CTO, the bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
Back with The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr, joining you this Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the show. We're so glad to have you with us. If you want to check out what Iowa Catholic Radio is up to in and around the diocese, you can do so at mchs.edu. Excuse me, that's Mercy College. iowacatholicradio.com. Excuse me, you can check out both. iowacatholicradio.com, where you can go listen live, donate, and see what we're doing in and around the diocese and see what shows that we have going on. You can download the Iowa Catholic Radio app and do the same. Or you can check us out on at Iowa Catholic Radio if you search that on Facebook, and at IA Catholic Radio on Twitter. Bud, for today, we're going to continue our series talking about sacrificial leadership and pointing out the stories of saints that paint this picture about what it looks like to extend sacrificial leadership of Jesus Christ throughout history. Today, we're going to talk about the patroness of our show, St. Joan of Arc. Now, Bud, this one, among all sorts of them, might seem like, how are you going to talk about leadership? Now, on one hand, you go, it should be easy if you know anything about Joan of Arc. She literally did lead armies into battle and really turned the tide when it came to the 100 Years' War for the side of the French. But, of course, she ends her life, her very short, young life, being burnt at the stake. So what are we going to say about Joan of Arc that's going to give us here in the 21st century guidelines about what it means to act like Jesus Christ in a sacrificial leadership way? So, Bud, before we get there, maybe just for a few people, if there's some highlights besides, maybe if it's just even recapitulating what I just said, what are some highlights about the life of St. Joan of Arc that might have something to do with leadership?
Well, I think what jumps out to me, first of all, St. Joan of Arc is just great to talk about. I think with Catholic children, they're always just kind of mesmerized by this story of a woman who kind of like broke boundaries and, found herself leading, like you said, military expeditions. St. Michael the Archangel appeared to her, which is pretty cool, pretty metal. And so there's just a lot of fun details there. But what jumps out to me, Bo, I don't know, we've done a lot with this series, but if we've gotten into this so much, what you see with St. Joan of Arc, it kind of reminds me of St. John the Baptist in the sense that the calling to which God calls us, the calling that God gives us, there's always a real particularity to it. And when you go through the leadership section in a bookstore, a lot of times it's 7 habits of highly effective people. And there's sort of this idea that there are these clear-cut principles or guidelines, or even sometimes it feels kind of mechanistic, plug in X, get out Y, and you'll have this kind of outcome. What you see in the life of someone like St. Joan of Arc is God can call us to very radical forms of commitment that we didn't exactly anticipate. Now, we have to be careful when we think about imitating St. Joan of Arc or St. John the Baptist. It's not just being weird for being weird's sake.
Right.
Both of them kind of adopted prophetic stances that made them stand out in their culture. But I guess what I'm saying is I feel like the books Who Moo My Cheese or 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, they can kind of turn life into this blah, and we never stop to really question what's the underlying sort of values that are undergirding this kind of worldview, when ultimately in all of this the primary question is faithfulness to God and God's calling. And I think about that even in my own life, because I think like in institutions of higher education, there's ideas about how administrators act. And without unpacking it all in just a few sentences, like sometimes I think Catholics who are fully committed to the gospel, like even how they administrate will look different. It won't fit that cookie cutter model. I
do like the idea of renaming or taking riffs off the books and applying them to saints. So with St. John the Baptist, it's Who Moved My Head?
Oh.
And then 7 habits that get you burnt at the stake, things like that.
That's right.
I am going to plagiarize our good friend, Father P.J. McManus, and a homily I heard, because I think it directly piggybacks on what you're saying for what you just got done saying, and how this deals with St. Joan of Arc and how we translate that into our own leadership, what we might be called to lead people towards. So Father gave a wonderful homily making the distinction between vocation and occupation, which is a pretty standard thing. But I think sometimes it bears to be repeated that vocation is a grace. It's a gift that you're given. And your occupation, of course, is how you earn your bread, earn your keep, the sort of position you might end up with. And so there's a question, I guess, Bud, is leadership a vocation or an occupation? Mm-hmm. Now, certainly within all sorts of organizations, leadership titles, so if you think of everything like a medieval king down to a CEO, whatever that might be, there are obviously positions that demand that you be a leader, and that's your occupation. But there's a question about vocation. Is vocation leadership, or do other vocations end up making you lead? And so one clear vocation, which is a gift that you cannot have unless God himself gave it to you, and is listed as such multiple places in the New Testament, is prophet. So clearly we're dealing with 2 prophetic people when we talk about John the Baptist, who you were bringing up, but today's show, Joan of Arc, both of them given specific gifts about things like the future and what needs to be done. And, of course, we're all very uneasy in the 21st century talking about people being prophetic. So even if it's not you see visions, Bud, and you're commanded to go give people these visions, even being prophetic in the sort of wider sense when people will mean it today, like people give prophetic sermons or their books were prophetic, it's a vocation because there's no way that you get that on your own, and there's no occupation. Like Iowa Catholic Radio doesn't have staff prophets, although that would be funny, and I nominate Jimmy for the first one. But it is to say that prophets end up getting very interesting occupations. Now, John the Baptist, what's his occupation? I guess monk. I don't know. We can get into that. But certainly for Joan of Arc, soldier, and particularly an officer, she ends up sort of in the army of the king. That's an occupation, and that, I think, is what got her into the political hot water that got her killed. And clearly she was supposed to do that. I'm not saying anything like that. But I'm with you that even though it's unrepeatable to be Joan again, to live in that situation, to be that particular person, the role of women, the role of the military, the role of the French and the English, all those things. But her vocation is something that is a gift that's given time and time again throughout the centuries. And as you said, that vocation might end up in very interesting occupations. So for some, being prophetic, you precisely exclude yourself from an occupation that would be considered leadership. But often, it seems that throughout time, God has given the vocation of prophet or prophecy in some regard to particular people where they end up in the occupation where you end up being leaders. So I don't want to say that all sacrificial leaders need to be prophetic leaders, but certainly it's the case that there are people like Joan of Arc that God has decided their occupation is going to be leader, but their vocation is to be prophetic. And that seems like something we should all consider in these times, that more and more of us might find ourselves called to that vocation in the occupations that fortune ends up giving us.
Well, I think with someone like Joan who ends up a martyr, the martyrs always remind me of our accountability to what's eternal. When Joan is tried for heresy and accused of having visions that are potentially demonic and things, like her response to her captors is like, God alone will judge me, and I think you and I'm speaking just like Catholics in the pews, as we go about our weeks, like our thoughts don't often turn to martyrdom. Like when we hear about saints who were martyred, we sort of pray like, well, if I ever came into that situation, I pray that God would give me the courage and the fortitude. But that doesn't mean, just because we don't face that red martyrdom, that we don't face moments that are analogous to that. And I think we've talked about this in the series, but a lot of times with the world, the one thing that it can hold over our heads is like really our mortality, and just like if you compromise on this one point, you can save your skin. But there's all sorts of ways that we can save our skin. Sometimes it's like budget concerns or the health of the institution, or even like your future career. How would this look on your resume or whatever? And, someone like St. Joan of Arc, she had gotten this word from God. She was committed to following through on it. And in the most harrowing of circumstances, when she faces not only death, but like a very painful form of death, she's committed. I think, some of her words remind me a bit of St. Thomas More, like, and by trying to save our skin, we've mentioned this before too, you just kind of kick the can down the road. Like, none of us get out of this world alive. So, that like when we talk about keeping things in an eternal perspective, it's not a cliche. It has a lot of vital importance for how we practice discipleship.
I think it's also interesting that as a leader, Joan, on one hand, we often think first about her martyrdom, and rightfully so, because the British did her so wrong, and her willingness to be a martyr in the end, and the courage that takes. But she was also very successful, even by worldly terms at some point, right? Up until that point, she turned the tide for France. And so I think that is important for both of us, that for both aspects, that as leaders in a sacrificial key, we can't shy away from success either. It's not going to be the case that a prophetic leader and a sacrificial one is always going to be the lovable loser. She made actual factual change and real winnings on the ground, but at the same time was willing to accept that martyrdom as well. The ability to be long-suffering and patient through success and failures in order to win that crown, that to me is the mark of a sacrificial leader that realizes that you can't hold on to either too tightly. And that gets back to the idea that prophecy and even this sort of sacrificial leadership is a gift, is a grace. This is The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr. Stick around, and we'll be back with The Uncommon Good right after this.
Thank you, Builder Ken Construction, for supporting Iowa Catholic Radio. Builder Ken Construction is a commercial general contractor. Projects range from tenant improvements, historical renovations, to high-rise buildings. Learn more at bdconstruct.com. Thank you, Builder Ken Construction, for supporting Iowa Catholic Radio.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Paul Martin and Paul Mitchell, owners of Imogene Ingredients. Imogene Ingredients supply specialized feed ingredients for livestock and pet diets to improve maternal and young animal health in both conventional and organic production.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by the Sarah Vocations Ministry. Sarah is an apostolate dedicated to the support of new and existing vocations to the priesthood and consecrated life. Learn more at joinsarah.org, joinserra.org.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Intervisions Healthcare, empowering men and women to make the most informed, life-affirming decisions for themselves and their families. Learn more at ivhcare.org, ivhcare.org. Thank you, Intervisions Healthcare, for supporting Iowa Catholic Radio.
Back to The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr, joining you this Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the show. We are talking about sacrificial leadership and the saints. We're giving the witness of St. Joan of Arc, the patroness of our show, speaking about how she is a sacrificial leader. But I don't want to give too much credit to the enemies of Joan of Arc, because there's so much we could say about her, but to waste a little bit of time in comparison to show that one of my favorite authors is Georges Bernanot. I'm sure I'm messing up his name in French. Most people know him as the guy who wrote Diary of a Country Priest. He also has written a marvelous essay on Joan of Arc, and in many ways that's what he points out, is in the face of sort of the simple innocence, not like the overdrawn Victorian sense, but that Joan of Arc simply and with innocence listened to what God said, and in many ways called the entire world's bluff on how much it supposedly cared about things like love and chivalry and all these things, and that their willingness to burn her at the stake shows that something, in his mind, profound died of medieval chivalry that day that they killed Joan of Arc so wretchedly and with so much cowardice, that you look at Joan as a shining beacon over against all those leaders, the churchmen, the theologians, the people who were politicians, the people who really were supposed to stand for what was right and good and authoritative in the Middle Ages, who kowtowed, right, in the face of a sort of political pettiness when it came to this country girl from France who really did make the entire world history turn on its head. I think it's important to think about that. We are tempted when we are in leadership to think that itself is the justification for whatever we do. But I think Joan of Arc shows exactly, as we've been saying, the vocation and the willingness to accept from God rather than using leadership as a shield to hide behind our preconceived ideas about the way things ought to be.
Yeah, it really is a gospel principle that to whom much is given, much is expected. And when that comes with leaders, a lot of time leaders are granted this kind of authority or power. And as Catholics, we shouldn't shy away from that. But unfortunately, in the world, you often see those who are given that great responsibility kind of shirking it or maybe dropping the ball. But I think you're right. Like, one theme that you certainly see in salvation history is like God will accomplish what God intends to accomplish regardless. And so even right now, I think with the practice of the faith, as it's waned in the West, like God's raised up all sorts of communities and missionaries all around the world. I'm a nerd, so like J.R. Tolkien is great with this too. Like, like it's the little hobbits who travel across Middle Earth and drop the ring in Mordor or whatever. And so like I guess as a leader, we have to be attuned to God's activity and keep our eyes open beyond like we think like it will always be accomplished by the powerful, but God truly does use like the weak, the despised, like so that his strength can be made known.
And I think that's exactly right. Part of the judgment, if you are an institutional leader, and clearly I don't think there's anything about our show that's done this, and I don't think there's anything about Joan, where the idea is institutions obviously are bad, and only these sort of wild-eyed, weird people from the margins are the only people that must be good. Her whole thing was to get the right person crowned king of France, right? So she was fighting on behalf of another institution. But there really is something to say that if, as a leader, if a childlike simplicity is proclaimed before you and you decide for institutional reasons to snuff out that light, it is you who's being condemned. And so that's another principle, I think, of sacrificial leadership, is that these men who found themselves in power over Joan couldn't die to themselves enough to say something else was going on. And if you go, well, Bo, how could they do that? They were on the side of the King of England, and actually it's more complicated than that happened than we're Burgundians, but we'll put that to a side. But if in the face of that, you can't set aside even the worldly expectations of your power, then you radically are not ready to follow after Christ, whose sacrificial leadership is a beacon that's shone just like St. Joan of Arc. St. Joan of Arc, pray for us. This is the Uncommon Good. May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, our families, city, state, nation, galaxy, universe, the whole kit and caboodle. This is the Uncommon Good, and we'll be back next week. But if folks want to be a part of the prayer life here on Iowa Catholic Radio, what are easy ways for them to do so?
Please join us in prayer. We broadcast the Rosary at 6 in the morning and also 10 a.m., the Divine Mercy Chapel at 2:55 p.m., and you should download the Iowa Catholic Radio app because you can pray the Rosary anytime, anywhere.
If you want to know what's going on in and around the Diocese of Des Moines that Iowa Catholic Radio is up to, as we've said before, you can go to iowacatholicradio.com or call 515-223-1150. People would love to chat. Also chat with you about possible donations. Some of the things that are going on, the Women's Mosaic Luncheon, November 15th, noon to 1 at St. Augustine's here in Des Moines. Father Vasic is going to talk about women unlocking the power of the Eucharist. So go make sure to check that out online. Also, the dinner in December is Saturday, December 10th at the Embassy Suites downtown with Cy Kellett from Catholic Answers. And then the Iowa Catholic Radio 15th Anniversary Footprints of God Pilgrimage to the Holy Land, with Steve Ray, Matt Wilkham, and Father P.J. McManus. That's going to be in November 2023. Again, you can go check out details at iowacatholicradio.com. This ministry doesn't happen except through your help, so please consider donating. We want to thank everyone who contributed to the fall fundraiser, but we can always use your support to make this ministry happen. 515-223-1150. You can call or text that to donate. iowacatholicradio.com, the Iowa Catholic Radio app, and any of the social media. You can get in touch with us talking about those donations. Bud, power to you. I hope leadership doesn't involve burning at the stake, but I hope that no matter what comes up, we can be sacrificial leaders in imitation of St. Joan of Arc, who is our show's patroness.
Amen, brother. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Be assured of our prayers.
This is The Uncommon Good, and we'll be back next week.
The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr is heard every week on wonderful Catholic stations like this one, and anytime on podcast. Just search for The Uncommon Good.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and The Uncommon Good provided by Mercy College of Health Sciences. Learn more at mchs.edu.